Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Evolution Another World from Crowd D Games. Evolution Another World is the next series in the Evolution, series. Starting with Evolution, I think, Origin of the Species, then we had Evolution from North Star Games, we had Evolution Climate, we had Oceans, we had Evolution, I want to say, A New Beginning, and now we have Evolution Another World from Crowd D Games. And this is, continuing that. I've played Evolutions, I've played Evolution's Climate, and I've played Oceans. Those are the only ones I've played so far, and obviously, Evolution Another World. The high-level general idea of this game is it's going to be a 1 to 4 player game in which you are ultimately trying to come up with the best species in the game. What you're going to be doing is you're going to have these species over here, you're going to be adding various traits to those species, all with the goal of eventually accumulating enough of this stuff over here so you can go ahead and transform, replacing the species with one of these, and the first person to do that 3 times is going to win the game, although there is a variant where you can do it 4 times instead. Now before we go any further, this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. But with that said, like I said already, the general goal is to have a species, to go ahead and acquire traits and to put traits onto the species so that you can most efficiently acquire energy from either the source or from the supply, putting it onto those creatures, and once you've filled up the row, transforming them. To that end, the turn sequence every single round is going to involve you taking 3 steps. The first 2 are optional, the third one is mandatory. Well, technically, let's start the round off. Let's start the round by going ahead and starting the game by drawing 5 cards. You'll have 5 cards, and you'll go ahead and take a look at your hand, and then all players decide how many cards to discard and to draw back up. I'm going to discard these 2 and draw back up. All players go ahead and make that decision, at which point, starting with the first player, you'll start taking turns. Now, a turn has 2 optional steps, followed by a mandatory steps. Optionally, you can go ahead and play a new species to the table. Now, you'll need to do this at certain points in the game because, like I said already, you're going to be transforming 3 species, which means you're going to want a minimum of 3 species in play. Often there are reasons to want more, but you'll want a minimum of 3 species in play. Past that, you'll go ahead and add a trait. Again, this is optional. You don't have to do it every round, but you probably do want to do it, especially starting off. You'll go ahead and take a look at your hand of traits over here, and you'll see, you know what? Actually, I'm going to start off a little aggressive, and I'm going to tuck Vampire under this trait. Let's take this guy out of place so we don't have that confusing you. But that would be my first turn over here. And then, starting off the bat, I can go ahead now, and I can take an action, which is where you take an action with a creature. So again, you play a new species down, that's optional. You add a trait to an existing species, that's optional. And then you take an action, which may or may not put that creature to sleep. So for example, the actions I have right now, and there's 4 general actions you can take. You can either acquire from the source over here, so you can look at the source, and you can say, I'm going to go ahead and take one of these. Now, I'm not going to do that, but that's one thing you could do. You would put it onto a creature, and you'd call it a day. That's option 1. Option 2 is you can transmute. If you have a full amount of energy over here, you can go ahead and transmute, do that 3 times, and the game's over. You have won. Like I mentioned already, there is a variant where you play until 4, but basic rules are playing until 3. The next option is simply falling asleep. You say my creature is going to fall asleep, that's my turn, go ahead and done. And whenever you activate a creature, you have to activate a non-sleeping creature, so that's generally something you don't do right away, but it is an option on the table. And lastly, the action I'm going to take right now is I'm going to attack. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do Vampire. The target loses, you know what, honestly, that's actually a terrible thing to do right now, because in this particular situation, this attacking ability only works if they actually have energy on them. They don't, so you know, I'm going to go ahead and actually going to gather from the source, taking an energy from the source. That's going to be my first turn, and I'm not going to just go to sleep. Taking energy from the source does not put you to sleep. The other 3 options, 2 of the other options put you to sleep, and the third one involves you removing your creature from the board when you transmute. So we're going to put this away over here. That was a starting first turn. The other player is going to look at their hand of cards. Let's pretend that they already went ahead and discarded and drew back up. And they're going to take a look over here. And honestly, they're a little worried about my Vampire trait right now. So they're going to go ahead and put down a new creature into play. They're also going to tuck Fire Breathing into play. And Fire Breathing is when you attack, the target loses a trait of your choice. If it does, then this creature gains 1 from the supply. So I'm going to activate Fire Breathing in order to remove Vampire from play. So Vampire is going to get removed because I'm going to attack this creature, and then because I did so, I'm going to put that into play. But attacking creatures do go to sleep. Taking energy peacefully from the source, nice and easy, you can keep on doing that. Taking energy from other creatures or attacking other creatures, that's a once per activation, a once per round kind of thing. Back to this person over here, we're going to grab my other hand, and I'm going to look at my hand, and you know what, honestly, we don't have a ton, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and place Lulling into play. I'm going to place Lulling into play. This turn I'm going to choose not to play a creature. I want to keep my hand of cards available to me in case I want them for one reason or another. But again, I'll have to play a minimum of 3 creatures across the course of the game. I'll then go ahead and activate, and I'm going to activate Lulling, where I'm going to go ahead and put a sleep token on him because he's attacking, but Lulling is going to make that person fall asleep, and then I'll take one from the supply. So I've now just removed one of his creatures from play, or at least not really from play, just so much as putting him to sleep. Back to this person's turn over here. And we're going to go ahead, you know what, we're going to be a bit of a jerk. We're going to do the vampire play right now. So we're going to put this person into play right now. We're going to tuck a trait underneath it. And we're going to use vampire to attack this creature, removing an energy and putting it onto him, which works because he has an energy. Back to this person. Oh, and then we'll fall asleep because that was an attacking. Now, I know that this character has 1 card left in hand, so I have to take that into account as I do things here. I think what I might do, there's a few options on the table. What I might do is I might just go ahead. There's options. I don't know what their next thing that they can do is. They could play a creature. Now, I know they could play a creature because they could play one more creature if they wanted to, but I don't know if they're going to want to do that or not. They could also add a trait, which I don't know what it is. I genuinely don't remember. In my case, I think what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start being a little bit more aggressive because I'm worried about their vampire and fire breathing, especially fire breathing. So I'm actually going to go ahead and on my turn I'm going to choose not to play a creature. I am going to place flying. So this creature can only be attacked by a flying creature, making him a little harder to actually engage with. And then this creature is going to pull one from the source. Now this is where I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that this character over here is going to play another card down. So let's see what happens. They're going to take a look at it, and they're going to say, you know what, honestly, you know what, we're going to go ahead and play this card down as another creature, and they're going to pull from the source as well. And you'll notice that they're playing a 4th creature, but the benefit of that is, well, we'll get to the benefit of it shortly. First of all, flexibility in general, but there are more benefits we'll talk about in a minute. And then it's back to my turn. Oh, and then they've activated the creature. They don't need to go to sleep because they took from the source. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play Fire Breathing onto this creature, at which point I'm going to Fire Breathing. Do I want Fire Breathing? Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do Fire Breathing over here, where I'm going to attack this creature and have them remove their vampire. Ooh. Do I want to get rid of the Fire Breathing or the vampire? You know what, I'm going to get rid of the fire breathing, so I'm going to attack this creature, getting rid of fire breathing, and adding one from the source, from the general supply, to my creature. And then from there, this next person would go over here. They'd have to activate putting a sleep token down, because there's no other valid option on the table, as would I, and that is basically a round of evolution. You're going to be on your turn. Oh wait, let's go ahead to resolve next round. When that's all done, you're going to go ahead. You're going to be placing a new source card into play. This source card is going to have a number of crystals energy you put onto it, depending on the player count. Also, it's worth noting there are some source cards over here that have certain things like this, where only you can put 2 down by default in a 2-player game, 4 and a 3 and 6 and a 4. But you have an additional 2 energy that go on here that can only be taken if you have the fearsome trait. So certain sources will have energy you can take if you have certain traits, but past that, the players will now draw cards equal to 2 plus the number of creatures they have with energy. So in this case, this player, by playing that extra person, even though they don't need 4, they're now going to go ahead and draw 5 cards, whereas I'm going to only draw 4 cards because I have 2 creatures with energy. Even though they have 4 creatures, one of them does not have energy. And that is how you play Evolution Another World. What you're doing is you're going to be on your turn, you're going to have a hand of cards. You are going to be taking a turn sequence that involves placing down a creature, optional, adding a trait, optional, and then taking an action with the creature, mandatory. That action may or may not put you to sleep. Your primary goal is to try to gather energy onto these creatures to eventually transform them. You're going to be adding traits that can mess with how you gather, how you attack, even the amount of energy you need to transform. There's basically, I think there's 16 traits in the game. I think so there's going to be 8 on this side, 8 on this side. There's a total of 16 traits in the game that affect the way you can be attacked, the way you engage, whether you can wake somebody up, copy other abilities, whether you exist on an astral plane, how you gather, how you attack, and how you defend. Broken up into different sections of how those traits operate, and you're doing so until eventually one player does achieve 3 creatures transformed, at which point they immediately win, unless you're playing until 4 creatures, in which case 4 creatures, and then you immediately win. And that is how you play Evolution Another World, which brings us to the review, starting off with ease of play. The game is really easy to pick up and play, although I will say I'm coming in with the bias of knowing the general evolution structure. So the general structure is the same to me, versus there's lots of differences to how this iterates. But past that, the rulebook is very easy to go through, very clear, no real questions that I had as I went through. There's 2 of these pages that devoted to solo mode, so you basically have like 4 pages of rules, because once you have cover setup, 6 pages, like 6 pages of rules to go through once you cover setup and components and solo mode. Very easy to go through and play, as well as the player aids. We have an excellent player aid over here, as well as a little turn-by-turn player aid that gives you all the information you need on the turn structure, the abilities in play. All the information is made incredibly accessible to you as you go through this. Game time does vary heavily depending on player count. A 2-player head-to-head game you can knock out in 30 minutes if you know what you're doing, 45 minutes otherwise, versus 3 to 4 players will tend to run you 45 to an hour easily. Could run a little longer. There's a lot more trying to knock each other down and a lot less room for someone to get away as players gang up on someone who is doing well in the game. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, first of all, offhand, the art in this game is incredibly well done, to the point that it's almost a shame sometimes, because you have this art that very often is going to be in your hand until you tuck it underneath somebody, and then it's gone. And on the back over here, you have this one art, which is great, but it's a single piece of art you'll see all the time. So, great art. You don't always get to see it as you play through it, but like really solid component, really solid art, and even the card sizes, by the way. These are not your typical playing cards. These are larger cards, which is nice, really has that artwork showing through. But more importantly than the art, the gameplay itself has a lot of hand management and pacing that really has you working off how to react. You want to be very careful what you do in this game because yes, you're trying to get energy, but depending how you approach it, whether it's a 2-player game or as a multiplayer game, and you do want to approach the game very differently depending on that 2 versus multiple players. When you're engaging as a multiplayer game, you have to be very mindful of the fact that players are going to attack the people who seem to be doing well. Players are going to go ahead and aggressively pursue those who seem to be building towards transmuting, and so you almost want to hold back your hand a bit. You want to place just enough that you're keeping up and keeping pace, but not so much that you present itself as a threat, because there's so much attacking going on in this game that players are going to attack those that present as a threat, and so hand management is everything. You go ahead and on your turn, you simply do nothing, just take an energy from the source. Maybe you don't add a creature, maybe you don't play a trait, maybe you want to be as unobtrusive, is that a word, as possible as you go through the game. Versus a 2-player game is a very different beast because 2 players, there's just that one person, and no matter what happens, they're targeting you, and so you want to be much more aggressive and much more in their face as you try to figure out what's the right combination of traits and species and creatures that you can get on the table that will get in their face and get in their way. There's a lot of hand management and pacing in this game, and how you approach it is going to depend on your hand of cards, the creatures on the board, the current play state, and the player count as you go through it. The game is also aggressive without being too aggressive. The fact that your creatures fall asleep after they attack means you can only really get that attack in once, unless of course you have Pester as a trait, in which case you can go ahead and discard Pester from another creature in order to wake up the creature, letting you attack again. And you can even resolve multiple attacks as you go through the game, which again gives you that building up towards a high degree of attack in the game, gives you a lot of flexibility for the fact that the source is going to run out of energy, but you also have to be mindful you'll go to sleep. So if you get all the energy you need to transmute, well, you better hope that it's your turn first, because first player is going to be rotating every round, and if you get first player first, then sure, you got the energy, you're going to go ahead and refresh, and you can start your turn with a fresh transmute. If you don't, then someone's going to go ahead and use a vampire ability on you, and you will no longer be prepped and ready to go. And there's overall just a great mix of traits, 16 traits, not so much as to be overwhelming, but not so few as to not give you enough to think about. This is a puzzly game that has, again, 4 traits that deal with just simple gathering from the source, 4 traits that deal with attacking, 4 traits that deal with defending, and then 4 otherwise traits that deal with a combination of abilities, and the combination of all of those combine very nicely to give you a lot of ways to build out your tableau and to figure out how you want to approach this game. It's a solid mix of traits with some complaints, which brings me to what I don't like in the game. There's primarily 2 things I don't like in the game. The first is that the game very heavily favors attacking to the point that defending, my biggest pet peeve is fire breathing. Fire breathing is a trait that goes ahead and removes other players' traits after you attack. The problem is, when you place a defensive trait in play, generally fire breathing resolves first. So fire breathing can remove a defensive trait, so effectively, you throw on spikes or whatever it is, even called spikes, you throw on toxic, and toxic, you throw on toxic, and toxic is going to go ahead and, Toxic will not trigger. So you throw on Toxic in the game, and suddenly the opponent's going to lose 2 energy when they attack you, making a solid defensive play against all those built-up attacking creatures. Except if the opponent has a single fire breathing, they will simply attack you, removing Toxic, leaving you vulnerable again. Which means often in the game, the only way to actually be defensive properly is to build up multiple defensive traits so that you can go ahead and hurt the opponent no matter what happens, because even if they attack you with fire breathing, there's still going to be a negative consequence left standing, but that's so much energy to defend, when anyways when you build up a defensive trait, they can often attack other creatures anyway, meaning attacking almost always has the edge as it is, and so the fire breathing is a card that I don't love how it operates. I wish it were resolved after the attack as opposed to before the attack. Otherwise, I'm kind of okay with the general balance. But that one difference, that fire breathing, to me puts a stronger edge on attacking that makes defending almost something I barely waste time on, except in specific situations. And then lastly, I'd say this game at higher player counts, meaning at 3 and 4 players, the game is very victim to the potential for kingmaking. Now, you do have to be mindful of playing the players, playing the game. There is that aspect. But in a game in which you are so motivated to attack those who seem prepared to transmute, in this game, as you play through the game, you are often relying on the other players attacking each other so that you can make your way through. Now again, it's not pure kingmaking in the sense that someone's taking the win from another player, but it does come down to kind of bash the leader, pull down the leader. All the players working together in unison to try to tear down whoever seems to be winning, and you can do that. So a lot of it is about that hand management, about that pacing, about trying to see the ways to persevere past 2 or 3 other players trying to take you down in unison. And so you have to be mindful of that. But to me, this game thrives as a 2-player head-to-head experience. At 3 and 4, it's fun, but fun with the caveat that there's enough tearing down that they could pull you back, they could restrain you, and they could stop you from winning unless you're really being tactical about how you approach the situation. As far as I can see, others not liking the game, first of all, you can get very crazy in those traits. Despite being only 16 traits, it's a lot to manage, a lot to be mindful of. Trying to look at the board to seeing 12 creatures in play that have a different combination of traits and how they operate and work together, it can absolutely be overwhelming, which does mean it can lead to AP prone players, to analysis paralysis prone, where you're taking forever trying to think through, well, what's the combination of cards I can play right now that will get me out of this tricky situation? What card can I play that will both let me attack you while also ensuring that you're not attacking me? How can I make that all work out well? The game does have those moments where even with just 16 traits, there's a little too much, a little too overwhelming, and too much to think about. And then lastly, that aspect I mentioned already, where the beautiful artwork, beautiful as it is often being hidden on the table underneath other cards. You only really get to enjoy that artwork when it's in your hands for the short time that it's in your hands, which, I mean, it's still beautiful artwork. I still very much enjoy it, but that's why it's what I can see others not liking and not what I can see myself not liking. As far as final thoughts on Evolution Another World, I overall very much enjoyed this game. I love the simplicity of the rules. I love the accessible playtime. I think the art's incredible. I think the way the traits combine works really well. My 2 pet peeves, though, are big pet peeves. I think fire breathing in its current state, to me, really favors attacking as a dominant strategy, and you almost always want to favor attacking much more so than you favor defending. In the games I've played, defending does come up, but it tends to come up late game, and it tends to come up because it's not a current better play. It is often the play you default to as opposed to the play you pursue, as soon as you realize that throwing toxic or fireproof or anything else on your characters means you still will not be able to persevere past it by just being defensive. And so fire breathing is a problem for me. And then lastly, like I said already, at 3 and 4 players, I will play this game and enjoy it, but I don't feel it has that same head-to-head tactical approach that a 2-player game does. This is the kind of game that you kind of instinctively think will be better at 3 and 4, and maybe for you it will be. For me, I think it thrives as a 2-player game, and at 3 and 4, it's fun, and I enjoy it, and I have a lot of fun, but if I win or lose, a lot of it does come down to playing the players, and less so feeling like I really did an excellent job in and of itself. As far as, so yeah, that's final thoughts of, rating. As far as rating is going to be a 3.5 out of 5. I think that if either of those aspects were different, or even if just fire breathing were different, this could easily be a 4 for me. As it stands, there's a lot I like, and there's a few things holding it back, but it is a game that I'm really enjoying, at least for right now. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, let's go through it. There's Oceans. Oceans is going to be one of the better games in the North Star lineup, from Evolutions to Evolutions Climate to Oceans. Then there's Evolutions, whatever the last one was, A New Beginning or something like that, whatever their last game was called. And then, of course, the original game in the Origin of the Species. But basically, if you like this game, there are a bunch of ways to approach this same engine from a few different creators, a few different companies, and multiple different iterations in play. With that, that's going to be my review of Evolution Another World. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.